Welcome to the Vital Spirit podcast. I'm Dr. Kelly Livingston, a naturopathic physician and your guide to a new health reality, one that connects body, mind, and spirit. Together, we'll dive deep into the art and science of holistic healing. Through working with hundreds of women through midlife transitions, I've discovered something profound. Most of our physical and emotional challenges are rooted in a maladaptive stress response. And true healing begins when we regulate our nervous system. Each episode will explore complex health topics in simple, empowering ways, uncover the deeper wisdom within each of us, and share practical tools for nervous system regulation to help you awaken your vital force and create lasting wellness. So, if you're ready to reconnect with yourself, your health, and your purpose, let's begin this journey together so you can experience life more fully human and deeply healed. Hi, and welcome back to the Vital Spirit podcast, where we explore the intersections of naturopathic medicine, psycho-spiritual healing, and women's vitality. I'm your host, Dr. Kelly Livingston, and today we're going to talk about something that I see in clinic every single week and something that most women experience at some point in their lives, and that is anxiety. Let's say a woman comes into the office and maybe she's in her early 40s or mid 50s, and she'll say something like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm waking up anxious at 3 a.m. I feel panicky before my period. I'm snapping at everyone and then crying 5 minutes later. My digestion is a mess. I'm exhausted but wired. And the worst part is my labs look normal. This is so common for me to hear. And I want to stop right here. Pause, because if that's you, I want you to hear this really clearly. You are not broken, you are not imagining it, and your body is not betraying you. What you are experiencing is what I call the gut-brain anxiety loop. This is the tangled web of digestive dysfunction, nervous system dysregulation, inflammation, hormonal shifts, and deeper spiritual unrest that so many midlife women are navigating. I promise you, you are not alone. But I don't feel like many people are really talking about this clearly. So let's ground this with a statistic. Nearly 60% of women in perimenopause report new or worsening anxiety symptoms, and yet the conventional medical response is often either an SSRI or silence. It's just in your mind. It's stress. It's aging. Your life's been really difficult. These are things that patients are told when they share with their physician that they're experiencing new onset anxiety or that anxiety has gotten worse during perimenopause and menopause. Very often, it is not even mentioned to them that this could be hormone related, and certainly it's a far stretch for them to show up at my office having been told it's their gut-brain axis. So that's why I'm here today. You see, anxiety is not just psychological. It's a gut signal shaped by microbiome imbalances, leaky gut, and sometimes even histamine overload, a nervous system response conditioned by trauma maybe, overwhelm and chronic stress. These are all contributing to the symptom that manifests as anxiety. This is a neuroendocrine process influenced by dropping progesterone very often, rising cortisol, and unstable blood sugar. And often it is a soul call asking you to slow down, listen, tap in, and change something foundational in your life. Anxiety is a message very often that something needs to change. And the reality is that anxiety is actually trying to keep you safe. It's trying to tell you something. In this episode, we'll walk through how anxiety really works in the body, why gut health, nervous system regulation, hormone repair, and meaning-making must all be a part of the solution. And I'll share some clinical stories, some functional testing insights, and tools that you can start using right away. So let's begin with the gut. I find that the gut is so often overlooked in mental health conversations, but it shouldn't be. It is central. It is the foundational piece that I start with all patients. As you know, gut-brain axis is pillar one of the Vital Spirit method. The lining of your gut houses over 70% of your immune system, and it's home to trillions of microbes that make your neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, and GABA. We've talked all about this in previous episodes. It's connected to your brain through the vagus nerve. We have a whole episode on the vagus nerve. And when your gut is inflamed or leaky, your brain knows and it responds. Here's what happens when the gut brain loop goes awry. Let's say your microbiome is off. Maybe you've taken antibiotics, had a history of birth control use, or maybe a restrictive diet that wasn't supplying all the foundational short chain fatty acids your gut needs to repair. Maybe you've just had chronic stress and high cortisol. You can potentially end up with overgrowth of organisms like candida or maybe methane producing SIBO. And these overgrowths essentially have byproducts that they give off. So they don't just irritate the gut, they're going to affect your brain chemistry. I like to talk with patients a lot about the die off or byproducts that these microbes can have and how they're not only creating leaky gut, which most people have at least heard of by now, but they're communicating via the vagus nerve and that gut brain axis to your brain that something is dangerous in the internal environment of your gut. So, when you have one of these overgrowths, you might feel spacey, brain fogged. You could feel anxious for no reason. You might feel depressed and bloated. You might notice that after certain meals, your heart races or your skin flushes, or maybe your mood shifts drastically. And that is not in your head, that's inflammation. Your gut lining might be leaky, which means there's an increase in intestinal permeability. All that means is that the tight junctions that typically are tight and hold your intestinal wall together have become compromised. So, substances like LPS, that I was just referring to, lipopolysaccharides from gram negative bacteria, for example, can pass into the bloodstream when they would normally be contained in that mouth to butt tube that is your GI tract. We call this metabolic endotoxemia, and it creates a storm of systemic inflammation. What happens is that LPS, the lipopolysaccharides from, let's say, gram-negative bacteria in the gut, are going to travel through the bloodstream because remember, they passed out of the gut where they should have been contained. They're going to cross the blood-brain barrier and activate microglia, the immune cells of your brain. When microglia are activated, we're going to see symptoms like brain fog, anxiety, sleep disturbances, fatigue that doesn't get better with rest. Does any of this sound familiar? This is not just stress. This is immune activation inside the brain, driven by a gut that's trying to sound an alarm. It's trying to tell you something. Now let's add hormones into the mix. Estrogen plays a role in maintaining that gut barrier integrity. We've talked about this before too, right? As estrogen fluctuates or declines in perimenopause and then through menopause, the gut becomes more permeable, so more leaky, which means inflammation can get worse. And if estrogen is not being cleared properly, say due to slow bile production and maybe high beta glucuronidase on stool testing, so you have higher histamine levels, your stool is essentially backing up into your system, and it's going to not only increase that leaky gut, but you might potentially be reabsorbing those toxic estrogens, right? Now, let's go with an example where the patient has a candida overgrowth, and let's leave behind those gram-negative bacteria. Let's think of a candida overgrowth and maybe even some small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So in the small intestine, not in the large intestine. And as a result, this person has higher histamine than normal, and maybe they have some compromised enzyme pathways that break down histamine. So now all of a sudden you have excess histamine. Estrogen's also going to play a role in increasing that, and your nervous system is ramped up. So now you're waking up at 3 a.m. and your heart is pounding and you have no idea why. And it really all is linked back to your gut. Let's also talk about short chain fatty acids. These are things that I look at in that stool test that I have mentioned before. They're byproducts of fiber fermentation by good bacteria, and one in particular called butyrate is essential for gut lining repair. I will very often see that butyrate and short chain fatty acids in general are low on a stool test when women come to see me. And butyrate is also really important for your immune system and even for neurotransmitter balance because your gut is so key in manufacturing these neurotransmitters and communicating to the brain. So many of my patients can have low butyrate on testing. They might not have had the right variety of fibers to supply butyrate. Psyllium is a great way that I increase butyrate. And that's a red flag to me that the gut terrain is not producing enough of the raw materials for mental health and resilience. I'll also look at certain species or commensal species in bacteria, some keystone species in particular that I want to see, some good guys that I want to see in that stool test that are so very important for mental health in particular. So, what does this all mean? It means that if we treat anxiety in isolation, when we slap a diagnosis on it without understanding the gut immune brain connection, then we miss the opportunity to resolve the real problem. It's not about calming the mind alone. It's about healing the gut so the body stops sending signals of danger to the brain. Now let's move upstream to the nervous system. You know, there are many, many episodes on this already, right? And you can go back and listen to some of those. But you cannot heal the mind or the gut if the body doesn't feel safe. On my website, we say you cannot heal the mind without healing the body, and you cannot heal the body without healing the mind. This is true mind body medicine here. Anxiety isn't just in your brain, it's a full body experience of neuroception, your nervous system unconsciously scanning of the world for cues of safety or danger. You could be sitting in a quiet room with no external threat in sight and still feel panicked or unsafe. That's not irrational. It's not crazy. It's your nervous system stuck in a survival pattern. You might also even be getting those cues of danger from your gut, like we just talked about. Remember, your autonomic nervous system has three primary pathways, and you can go back and listen to the episode on this as well. You have your sympathetic fight or flight, mobilized, activated, alert, ready to fight or flight. You have your dorsal vagal freeze or shutdown, collapse, numbness, disconnection, dissociation. And you have your ventral vagal, social engagement, safety, where you're feeling connected, you're able to rest, you're feeling resilient, you have compassion. We all love the ventral vagal, right? So go back and listen to that episode if you haven't yet. And remember, these aren't psychological states. They're biological reflexes shaped by your past experiences, your trauma history, how your nervous system was formed as a child, your physiology, and your current environment. And they're always working in the background, trying to protect you. The goal of this biology is to keep you safe. But so many of my patients are stuck in the sympathetic overdrive. They are hypervigilant, jumpy, sleeping poorly. They might feel wired, but also exhausted, having a hard time digesting. So you might see some constipation or bloating, or even see excessive bowel movements. And they might feel this way even when they're trying to relax or during yoga, meditation, breath work. These are those patients I've spoken about before who might even say, I can't sit down and meditate. I cannot sit down and do a breathwork practice. It doesn't feel good because it essentially feels really dangerous to your nervous system. Other patients might oscillate between sympathetic and dorsal vagal shutdown. So you might start the day feeling anxious and kind of overdoing it and pushing through, maybe relying on caffeine. But then you have this crash mid-afternoon and feel really disconnected, maybe in social settings, and have lots of social anxiety that causes you to shut down and kind of want to hermit and go be alone and withdraw and socially isolate. Now, sure, this might be part of your personality. I'm definitely an introvert, which you probably can't tell right now. But these are nervous system states, right? The more time you spend in survival state, the harder it is for your gut to heal, your hormones to stabilize, and your neurotransmitters to regulate. As I said, we've talked all about the vagus nerve, which governs gut motility, enzyme secretion, inflammation control. And when that vagus nerve goes offline, your body prioritizes survival, not repair. This is why I focus so much on nervous system regulation with new patients, right? Even before we're beginning on working on gut repair, I'm going to introduce practices like vagal toning, things such as humming, gargling, cold water face dips, breath work, long, slow exhales. These are all effective ways to begin to shift out of fight or flight and back into calm. I have a whole vagal tone guide on this if you want to get started on a few today. And these are not one size fits all. You definitely might want to try a couple of them, see what you like, or consult with a local practitioner or myself if you're a patient, and really narrow it down to what particular exercises will help shift your nervous system state. Remember in the episode on the nervous system and on the safe and sound protocol, we talked all about recognizing and mapping your autonomic nervous system. So, first things first is knowing what state you're in, and then having some tools that can help move you out of that state and more into that ventral vagal social engagement so that your nervous system is not dysregulated or contributing to symptoms of anxiety. So, we talked about auditory therapies like the safe and sound protocol that can help repattern the nervous system using filtered music, gently guiding your brain back into safety. Somatic awareness practices, such as feeling your feet on the floor, noticing the breath in your belly, or releasing tension through movement, such as a yoga practice, can really help to build capacity for presence and sensation in the body so that those sensations no longer feel so scary or dangerous. This is really important, especially if you have health anxiety. When we bring online this kind of regulation into your daily life, and when we're working on parasympathetic, healthy nervous system regulation, everything else becomes more effective. So the supplements that you're taking are going to work better. Your sleep will be better. Your gut will be calm and able to do its job, and your mood will stabilize. Now let's talk about food and herbs. One of the fastest ways to create safety in the body is to stabilize your blood sugar. Skipping meals or eating refined carbs leads to blood sugar crashes, which feel scary and dangerous in the body. Also, when your blood sugar crashes, your body's going to make cortisol so that through the process of gluconeogenesis, it can pull sugar from your liver. Your body's always trying to keep things stable. So, if you skip meals or if you do have that blood sugar high from a high carb or high sugar meal and then that blood sugar dip, then the adrenaline and cortisol that are released in the body, those chemicals can mimic the feeling of anxiety. Very often, when I first run blood work in a new patient who has anxiety, I'll see that they have blood sugar imbalance issues. And resolving this issue is one of the most important steps that we can take. Some key take homes to prevent these crashes are to build your meals around protein, fat, and fiber, eating every 4 to 5 hours, and avoiding caffeine on an empty stomach. So many women that I see are having their coffee without anything else in their stomach, and then they're wondering why they're getting anxious after that. As I mentioned, histamine intolerance is another common cause of anxiety. When histamine builds up in the body due to estrogen imbalance, leaky gut, or poor detox, you can get symptoms like racing heart, insomnia, and anxiety after eating. So, some foods high in histamine include fermented foods, bone broth, avocado, leftovers. And you might be thinking, Dr. Kelly, those are things that you told us to eat in the gut brain hormone episode. And yes, these foods are great. They're wonderful for our gut, but not if you have a histamine issue. So I might support detox pathways in those patients with things like castor oil packs and nutrients like B vitamins, magnesium, and vitamin C. Now, while I'm working with a patient to figure out where their anxiety is coming from, so remember, we're going to work through the pillars of the vital spirit method, and we start with the gut brain axis and then we move on to the HPA axis, right? I will certainly use herbs. They can be powerful allies. So, as I'm trying to figure out why a patient has anxiety, I might want to calm their nervous system using nervines. So, some of my favorites are passion flower, passiflora, lemon balm, skullcap, and these will often help calm racing thoughts and soften or ease muscular tension. I do like to select herbs individually for each patient. So, different herbs have different profiles and uses, so it's really not one size fits all, but those are some of my favorite calming herbs. And then I know I've talked before about ashwagandha, which you can use long term to calm and restore a healthy nervous system response. It helps over time to lower cortisol. And you might, if you need some more energy through that process, use rhodiola, which is more energizing and uplifting. Another one of my favorites would be holy basil, which is really soothing and calming, and I love holy basil tea. I will also use homeopathy and gemotherapy. So, remedies like argentum, ignatia, phosphoric acid, arsenicum is one of my favorites for anxiety. And then gemotherapies like fig, blackcurrant, silver linden, they're really helpful for supporting the gut brain axis. So, This is extremely personalized and individualized. If you're interested in gemotherapies, you can certainly look up what those are. You could start reading about flower essences. You can certainly look into homeopathy for anxiety. But I do find that having the guidance of a healthcare practitioner in this process is very helpful. As naturopathic physicians, we are trained in 4 years of clinical botanical medicine, 4 years of homeopathy. So these are tools that I'm very familiar with, and I say them like everyone might know what they are. I realize that you might not. So I can certainly work on even some more handouts for you all on some of the most helpful homeopathic remedies and gemotherapies. They're so safe to use. They're wonderful to get started with on your own, because even through the process of selecting a remedy, you're going to start to identify and understand some of the triggers, some of the patterns in your anxiety, and that will be really helpful when and if you do work with someone like myself, or you might even find a remedy that really does help to calm your nervous system and ease some of that anxiety. Now, of course, I'm going to further personalize my assessment of an anxious patient with testing, right? So, I'm going to look at the stool to assess the contribution of gut brain axis. I'm going to assess nervous system state. I might look at hormones either in saliva or urine, depending on the patient and our goals. And I'm definitely going to rule out things like low ferritin, for example, which I talked about in a previous episode. I'll give a little sidebar. I cannot tell you how many female patients in perimenopause and menopause come to see me, and when we test their ferritin, their storage form of iron, it is tanked. It is so low. One of the common symptoms of that can be heart palpitations. So now this patient is feeling this anxiety, or they're labeling it as anxiety, and it's really truly low ferritin. So go back to the episodes on lab testing, and you can certainly dig into more of that. But some of the ones that I find outside of ferritin to be the most important to look at in anxiety would be gut dysbiosis. So again, we've talked all about that. Gut inflammation, in particular, looking at your fecal secretory IgA, because inflammation in the gut means inflammation in the brain, and inflammation in the brain can feel like anxiety, right? And then remember low progesterone. So progesterone, as it declines through perimenopause, progesterone is what actually helps us with our manufacturing of our GABA, which is our calming neurotransmitter. So when your progesterone is low, your GABA is not going to be kind of doing its job as well as it was before. So you're going to feel more on edge and more anxious. This is also going to contribute to sleep disturbances and insomnia in some of those patients. Now, this is going to play along with cortisol dysregulation. So remember, your cortisol, you should be making it in the morning. It should be highest in the morning, ready to take on the stressors of the day. And then the cortisol curve is going to come down throughout the day, and then it's going to flatline at night so that or your body knows, it's time to fall asleep. It's time to make melatonin. And then melatonin comes up. I have so many posts on Instagram about this, and I've definitely talked about this in previous episodes. But now what's going to happen as your progesterone declines and potentially you have some cortisol or HPA axis dysregulation is cortisol is going to start to come up too early in the morning. So say 3, 4 a.m. and you're waking up and your heart's racing and you don't know why, and you're not getting that deep restful sleep. So those two really play together through the perimenopausal shift and impact sleep. And sleep is a seat of health. So all of that is going to create the perfect storm for anxious feelings, right? Depleted B vitamins are extremely important to look into in this phase as well. So I had mentioned B vitamins before. B6 in particular is one of the most common deficiencies in really, I would say, America as far as contributing to mental health issues, because you need B6 to make your neurotransmitters, and it's important for sleep. So definitely look into your B vitamin status. I do like to run a micronutrient B6 panel. And magnesium, which we can test for. I like to test for magnesium in the red blood cell because it's going to be a more functional marker of what's actually effective and working in your body. And then omegas, we've talked about these before. You will not imagine how many women come to see me and they're feeling anxious, and we look at their omega fatty acid profile, and they are so low in omegas, which are really, really key for our nervous system health and for maintaining positive mood. Next, you can also go back to the episode on thyroid. So imagine if you have hyperthyroidism, of course you're going to feel anxious, right? You're overproducing thyroid hormone. You're in that ramped up state. It almost feels like fight or flight. You can also have poor conversion to T3, as we've talked about before, which can contribute to anxiety, even though some of the more common symptoms of that might be lower mood. And certainly your mitochondria and any sort of oxidative stress or excess inflammation because you're not getting enough antioxidants are all going to create this perfect storm of anxiety because you're scanning your body and your body doesn't feel safe. So I really want you to know if you are a woman that is struggling with anxiety, whether it's new or you've had it forever, that you are allowed to look beyond just your standard conventional normal labs. You're allowed to look beyond your CBC and metabolic panel and cholesterol that your primary ran. You're allowed to ask better questions and you're allowed to expect better answers. And all of this leads to what I think is the most important shift of all, reframing anxiety not as something that's wrong with you, but as a wise signal from within. My heart breaks when patients come in and they say, "Oh, it's my anxiety. I have anxiety. I'm anxious." You are not your anxiety. There is so much that you can do to listen to that message, figure out what it's telling you, and resolve the issue. I have seen hundreds of women do this. I am one of them myself. Throughout the Vital Spirit method, we honor anxiety as a call to wholeness. I am so often saying to patients, okay, how can we befriend our anxiety? And I know if you don't know me that well and you haven't sat with me as a patient, at first that might sound kind of annoying. Like, lady, this anxiety is not my friend. But I promise you that as we start to acknowledge that there is a message coming from the anxiety and we start to get comfortable or more comfortable with it and learn how to work with it and then therefore eliminate it, life is so much different after you've acknowledged that and worked through it instead of just kind of pushing it away or suppressing it, right? What we suppress will grow stronger. What we push away or ignore or try to bury, it will come back. It will manifest in another way. So when we're looking at this holistically, so say you came to me with anxiety and it's turning on in the morning. So you're waking up and you have that racing heart and your thoughts are racing already. It's just immediately happening, right? One of the first things I'm going to work on with you is through mind, right? Mind, body, spirit. We're going to think about, okay, how can we rewire some of these thought patterns? How can we build emotional resilience and create safety in the nervous system? If we're waking up immediately with a racing heart, let's figure out if there's a nutrient deficiency. Let's figure out if there's a physiological cause. Where is our cortisol? What does our thyroid look like, right? And then we're going to sit, pause, take a step back, breathe, and think, what is this trying to tell me? What are the thought patterns that I immediately go to? Is this a pattern that I've had my whole life? What are the messages that my mind is trying to tell me? And certainly a lot of the work that I do with patients is around creating that pause and that space so that we're not just responding to the anxiety, or reacting to the anxiety. We're actually trying to be able to respond to it. And breathwork is a really powerful tool for this. But it's definitely one of the tools that when you introduce it to a patient in the state of anxiety or panic, they're just like, no, I don't, that's not going to work for me right now. So it is something that I really, really want patients to be proactive about. So we're building up the strength of that parasympathetic nervous system with a breathwork practice before we're in the anxious or panicked state. So again, you can go back to some previous episodes on that. And I'm going to have, I know I'm going to start guests soon. I keep saying this, but I'm going to have a guest on who is a breathwork expert and she will walk you guys through a breathwork practice as well. I can't wait for that. So tune in for that one for sure. And then mind, body, right? So we move on to the body. So we're repairing the gut, we're balancing hormones, we're replenishing those nutrients to really restore vitality. So many of my patients who experience anxiety truly have a physiological root cause. So step one with me is always, again, as I'm holding safe space and talking about nervous system and maybe introducing breath practices, I'm always looking for, is there a physical cause to this anxiety? And especially starting with the gut. And then we move on to spirit, right? So we're connecting with something deeper within ourselves, something bigger than ourselves. We're learning how to tap into that intuition. What is our anxiety telling us? Maybe we're incorporating rituals into our daily practice that help calm our nervous system. And certainly reaching out to community and having support through this process is so key. So again, in that episode on nervous system regulation and the safe and sound protocol, I talked about co-regulation and connection. And so If another human doesn't feel safe for you to co-regulate, you can do that with a pet. Pets are great for this, but essentially we do need to connect with other nervous systems. And that is really key in an anxiety journey for a patient. So when you stop fighting the anxiety and start listening to it, something dramatically shifts. You rebuild trust and find steadiness in the communication with your body. So I know that doesn't sound easy just listening to me say that on a podcast. I really do encourage you, if you're not local to work with me, to find a naturopathic practitioner who can help with this. She doesn't know I'm going to do this. I actually don't even know this person in person in real life, but I highly recommend, if you struggle with anxiety or panic, to look up Dr. Nicole Kane. She has a book called Panic Proof. I absolutely love all of this book. I've given it to many patients. I believe she has a podcast, a great website. So if you're not local to me and we can't work together, I feel like you can get at least some more information from that book about all of the things that I've talked about today. And if the gut aspect of this journey really resonated with you, then I invite you to take a look at my 21-day gut reset program on my website, where we take a lot of these principles, these foundational changes, and we put them into practice. So you'll get repair protocols, anti-inflammatory meal plans, nervous system regulating tools, spiritual reflection prompts, and a unique Seeds of Health journal that I've created. You can learn more about that and sign up on my website, drkellylivingston.com, just dr and then my name.com, or you can go to the show notes for that. And definitely don't forget to download your free vagal tone guide to begin regulating your nervous system today, because your body needs to feel safe in order for your mind to feel safe. That's always step one with me. And if this episode moved you, please share it with a friend or leave a review. It helps more women to find this work. And thank you so much for listening. And please remember, your symptoms are not the problem, they're the portal. There is going to be something so much better beyond these symptoms if you can start to listen to them and work through them instead of ignoring and suppressing them. I do know that that sounds easier said than done, right? So I highly recommend you do find a practitioner that you trust, who you can co-regulate with and work through these together. Have a great day.